Chapter 1. Born of Violence. The instant a species becomes sentient is the moment war is forever on the horizon. That was the conclusion Norcock's top scientist, Creek, had derived from the last 30 minutes of deep thought. He recalled thousands of years that his species, the Norcocks, had been at peace. Centuries filled with new technology and scientific discovery, with earlier advances giving the Norcocks near immortality. Immortality at a physical cost, but preserving what was most important: consciousness after the body's death, effectively curing death. But even with that accomplishment, they could not cure themselves of the plague called war. Being one of the most talented of the Norcock scientists, Creek sat contemplating the work undertaken throughout the different periods of advancements, but every thought circled back to the last 100. Seemingly, all advancement during previous centuries had been nothing more than preparation for war. Creek remembered clearly when the leaders of the 4 planets of Norcocks agreed that war was the only way to solve their differences. Each planetary leader stood as one, leaning forward and touching foreheads together in a sign of agreement and respect, finalizing the meeting. He closed his large, teardrop eyes, contemplating the pettiness of it all. Those differences had simply been over in which order resources from the use of the galactic Corona Hypergate system should be distributed. The Hypergate system used their star's energy and gravitational well to travel from one solar system to the next within seconds, exiting at the targeted solar system's star. This was one of the oldest scientific breakthroughs. It dated before the Great Binding, which preserved consciousness after death, but caused loss of many memories. Due to loss of memory and records regarding the Hypergate being mysteriously non-existent, no one planet could lay claim to it, but all wanted the benefits. Travel between planets within a solar system was simple due to Norcock's galactic cruisers having near light speed capabilities from power of artificially created microsuns known as a Corona drive. After thousands of years of industrial growth, resources in the Norcock solar system became depleted. Though many attempts were made for faster-than-light travel, it was never achieved. And with their solar system on the far edge of the galaxy, the nearest system was more than a 1,000-year journey. This made the galactic Corona Hypergate the most valuable resource in the galaxy. Opening his eyes once again, Creek had the same thought as many times before: destroy the Hypergate. It would be so very easy to do. Yet again, his thoughts turned to just how destructive it would be for every Norcocks, not to speak of the resources that would be confiscated from all to rebuild. Creek knew he just didn't have it in him to harm another Norcocks in any way, nor did others, which became obvious on day 2 of the war. On that day, Norcock's armies from Ozon, Kiwani, Zilqua, and Iquan faced off on a resource-depleted moon, barren of all life. 10,000 soldiers from each planet assembled in a large square formation. Hours passed as one side looked across the field of battle at their newly declared enemies, yet none moved from where they stood. After many rotations of the moon around its host planet, with little more than a fiercely blinked eye toward the other side. Weeks later, it was decided war would have to be fought by other means. For the last decade, the means to conduct war had become Creek's only mission. Regrettably, he presented to the Ozon leadership an idea of genetically modifying other species to battle for them. Specifically, soldiers created from lesser life forms, such as the fur-covered beasts of the Hogan-Low system. The species were of no value to the Norcocks, since they merely lived in large vegetation, picking insects from each other, with absolutely no notable evolutional progression. Then there was the fact that their planet was already virtually stripped of any valuable resources. With little debate, the Ozon leadership approved Creek's project, and within months, the first modified Hogan-Low soldiers deployed. Ozon called for another battle to take place, It was proposed to take place on the same barren moon as the previous uneventful battle. The leadership of Kawani, Zilkwa, and Ekwan agreed. Days later, each planet, like before, placed their armies in the same square formation, only this time the ozone side was empty. An hour passed with the ozone side of the square formation unoccupied. 30,000 identical Norcoks pondered the thought. Perhaps the no-show meant they had won a battle. Suddenly, a large crate descended from the sky, resting equal distance from the current three sides. Puzzled by its appearance, many from all sides began moving closer to investigate. To those in the rear, it looked like any other energy-based shipping crate used for transporting resources. For the curious, it was abject terror. Within a blink of their teardrop eyes, the walls vanished, revealing large, hairy creatures. The creatures released a tremendous roar from mouths full of sharp teeth. The Ozon leaders believed they had won the war as they watched from the safety of their ship. Below, Norcock's bodies were torn in two and even used to smash those that couldn't move away fast enough. The gruesome scene made the stomachs of many churn, caused others to want to hide from the very sight. Still others, though, said that the ends justified the means in an emotionless state common to the Norcocks. And yet something lurked beneath that the others could tell enjoyed the carnage more than they would ever let on. To this, they turned a blind eye with the Ozon leaders, thinking that they would never have to deal with this again. Little did they know, it would not be that easy. The infectious nature of war had begun. Months later, each planet had created their own version of the Hoganlow beasts, each having slightly different characteristics and looks than that of their enemies. With memories from the first days of war long past, Creek looked upon his latest evolution suspended before him. Creek was filled with sorrow, knowing they too will be sent off, likely never to return, as the war between the four planets raged on. Each battle brought new Hoganlow creations, as the thirst for larger, faster, and more aggressive soldiers spread. The competition kept many spectators, watching from floating observation stations, entertained. Now, looking at the creation suspended just inches above the table, it was obvious they had very little in common with the Hoganlow, other than a shared helix at this point. Creek was considered tall for his people, standing just 4 feet, while current soldiers now measured 15 feet near completion of the growth stage. Looking down almost endless rows, he noted once again that the male-to-female ratio of new embryos seemed to always maintain a 50% ratio. The other aspect of this ratio that fascinated him was that those who developed closely together seemed to remain that way to the end, something that comes all too fast for these Hoganlow soldiers. "When does it end?" Creek asked the unconscious soldier, lying suspended in midair with a blank stare to the ceiling. He knew there would be no chance of any response, since they hadn't been programmed with the level of intelligence for a warrior yet. That process was done in stages to prevent them from turning on their creators, as many earlier versions, now in storage, had done. Even that was irrelevant compared to footage from their deployment upon enemy cities. In many cases, it was enough to drive some Ozonians to self-destruction, essentially ending their physical body's operations, returning their consciousness to binding source crystals, and vowing not to take another body till the conclusion of the war. They were unwilling to deal with what had been unleashed upon a world that, not long ago, they had called their neighbors, not enemies. However, others enjoyed the entertainment, taking to floating stadiums for the anticipated pleasure of watching such carnage. For battle, soldiers received Norcox's best thorium-powered weapons. Being killed by the weapon was not the horrific part, but what happened after. The weapons produced a blast so intense it created large holes in the soldiers, while leaving no organic material unharmed. For most Norcox, the sight of soldiers blown apart was not troubling. But what happened when a Norcox was struck by this weapon terrified each of them. Norcox tissue was instantly roasted, often not killing the victims. The horrific body damage was only secondary. The smell of Norcox burnt flesh launched Hohenlohe soldiers into a feeding frenzy, causing them to devour victims while they moved through cities. Many consciousnesses went insane, losing themselves to areas within the binding crystals few experienced. Kriek felt something churning deep inside and feared the possibility of genetically altered soldiers from one of the other planets landing near his laboratory. Not that he feared his body being eaten after being killed. Rather, he feared becoming one of the less fortunate eaten alive once the frenzy began. Clearing his mind from wandering thoughts of past transgressions, Kriek refocused his attention to one side of his lab, where genetically modified soldiers from the other 3 planets were held, having been captured and suspended in stasis for study. Kriek believed Ozon's latest soldier would rival those of Kiwani as he looked over specimens arranged by height. Kiwani towered above most others, at 12 to 15 feet in height, thick muscles, little to no hair, and black skin tone. Zilqua stood 10 to 14 feet in height, and hairy with a brown skin tone. Aquan stood 8 to 10 feet in height, little hair, small muscles designed for speed, eyes elongated for improved vision, and a light skin tone. Kriek estimated his new Ozon soldier would grow between 11 to 14 feet in height, hairy with larger muscles than the previous soldiers, and with the pale skin that identified them as being from his world. With the soldiers now in their final stage of production, Kriek knew within a day he could observe them in battle. The first 200 were heading to education processing, and then into battle, where he could monitor them through transmitters grown deep within their brains. Though he was happy with the new modifications, Kriek wished he knew how to remove the instinct to feed on the burned flesh of others. In the Norcox solar system, eating meat was something so far in their past that it wasn't even considered a possibility. Yet now they saw it during every battle waged. The consumption of enemy flesh was thought to be the cause for soldiers who lived through battle becoming difficult to control by their Norcox commanders. Just as Kriek turned to wave his hand over holographic controls, sending the newest soldiers to education, additional screens appeared all around, with warnings flashing brightly. In Norcox, it read, "Warning, attack in progress." Kriek felt the fear everyone had of the war and immediately sent his new soldiers to education processing, adjusting the processing to shorten the time of transfer from an hour to minutes. He hastily began educating all soldiers with the basics of battle and the need to follow instructions. As he worked, the warning screen screamed at him, while faint echoes of war penetrated the facility's reinforced walls. Minutes later, the first soldier appeared from education processing. Only then did he fear that he might have been naive in rushing the education program. He looked up at a pale, hairy soldier staring back down at him. Quickly, he began speaking. "I am Kriek, your commander. You are Soldier V-159. Do you comply?" Kriek asked with a slight tremble in his voice. The large soldier replied with a deep voice, "Yes." Thankful that he was not being eaten by the soldier, who just minutes ago lay unconscious in front of him, Kriek's anxiety began to fade as he turned back to the holographic display. "Good. Then you can lead the others," Kriek sighed in relief. "Yes, it ends now," V-159 said with a powerful voice that differed greatly from the high-pitched tones the Norcox spoke. Kriek's head snapped back to the soldier in front of him, shocked by the reply. Amazed by V-159's response to a question Kriek had asked prior to education processing, Kriek felt a scientific curiosity sparked in him that he had not felt in a long time. "Are you answering the question from earlier?" Kriek asked, knowing that everything he understood about the production of soldiers said it wasn't possible. V-159 stared at Kriek as if unsure how to respond. A second later, another soldier appeared from education, ending their conversation. V-159 turned to the newly educated soldier, locked eyes with her, and said,
I am V-159, you are V-163. Do you comply?
Yes, it ends now.
Creek marveled at how very different these two were from all the others, seemingly working as one with V-159 taking command. Both seemed more intelligent, even with a modified educational program, showing signs of understanding before education processing. Creek considered holding them back for further experiments, a consideration that was dismissed as explosions near the facility vibrated everything inside. As new soldiers emerged from education processing, Creek observed as V-159 and V-160 prepare them for battle. V-159 greeted them by their identifier, and V-160 presented each with body protective wear and weapons. Both exhibited greater leadership than any others before. Creek studied every movement, word, and interaction with the others as they prepared for battle. He noted them in his digital logs for future projects. With all the new soldiers ready, V-159 showed no hesitation leading them into the battle, raging just a short distance away. I hope you survive this, V-159 and V-160, Creek said, as his most interesting creations yet took the lead into battle. Even with a strong desire to retain them for study, Creek watched as they and the others exited his facility. It had been a very long time since he had felt a true interest in anything. Moving his fingers in the air, Creek activated transmitters contained deep within the Hoganlow soldiers, hoping to obtain all data possible before their inevitable demise. Through the eyes of V-159 and V-160, it was quickly clear they possessed many traits that thousands before did not, the first of which was compassion for the other newborn soldiers. Creek watched as V-160 ran from her position, frantically dragging another soldier who had become wounded to safety, something that had not been observed during the entirety of the genetic soldiers' war. Further observation he was eager to log was that which he had spent years working to achieve. These new soldiers were not snacking on burnt Norcock's bodies, though the enemy soldiers continued to as they fought. Yes, it ends now, the sonorous voice echoed in his thoughts as he attempted to process whether V-159 was answering the question posed to him before education processing or some other anomaly. It was not the first time he had asked the newly grown soldiers questions before sending them to education, but it was the first time one had answered. Losing track of endless days since the battle began on Ozon, his home planet, Creek continued to observe their actions while advancing attacks on Zilqua's genetic soldiers through cities that span more than 100 miles. While conducting his observations on the pair, Creek never allowed himself to get behind, with his endless work producing new soldiers to aid in the fight. Each battle fought in this war was to the death. No defeated genetic soldier was ever retrieved from battle, and Creek wanted to give V-159 and his counterpart every opportunity to survive by producing more soldiers. Creek remained in his lab, not from the fear of being injured or killed in the war, but from fear of missing new observations from V-159 or V-160. A great majority of work was completed during data download periods when battles paused for both sides to retrieve data. Every 16 hours, when memory processors deep inside the soldiers' brains became overwhelmed, data automatically initiated downloads to history crystals, where all records were kept. These crystals not only stored what each individual did, but every emotion, thought, and sensory experience encountered. For Creek and the Norcocks, transfer time was all but instantaneous, with information downloaded into their genetic doubles or binding source crystals upon death. for the more primitive genetics of Hohenlohe soldiers, transfers could last anywhere from 1 to 8 hours. This was because of the limited capacity of their primitive brains and 2-inch organic transmitter located near its core, something resembling more of an eye than a transmitter. Creek also put soldiers' processing time to use on another experiment he was running with new pre-educated soldiers. After asking, "When does it end?" several times, the question had lost all the meaning it had once possessed when asked randomly to V159. Now, it was purely about duplicating the response.
Then you can lead the others.
After soldiers returned from the education
Yes.
processes, Creek repeated his
Then you
speech.
can lead the others.
"I am Creek,
Yes.
your commander.
I am Creek.
You are Soldier V.
Soldier V.
Do you comply?" Each new
Good.
soldier
Then you
replied,
can lead the others.
"Yes."
You
"Good.
can lead the others.
Then you can lead the others,"
Good.
Creek
Then you
stated
can lead the
eagerly,
others.
awaiting a reply to his
Yes.
earlier question, yet never receiving one. With every new soldier he tested, Creek was unsure how he felt not being able to duplicate the same response from V159, though each time he did not receive a similar response. The more significance he placed on V159 and V160. Many weeks passed as the battle slowed. V159 led the soldiers to eliminate the remaining Zilkwa soldiers. The siege of his city was coming to an end. Apparently, the Zilkwas were no longer sending in reinforcements. Battles in this war were fought to the death, and no Hohenlohe soldier had ever retreated from battle. They were designed this way. Creek watched the images he received from V159 as he slowly closed in on their last Zilkwa position. It would not be long before his most fascinating creation would be in his lab once again. What is that Zilkwa soldier doing? Creek studied a box one Zilkwa soldier held in the palms of his hands. They don't give soldiers devices like that. Creek watched a screen appear above the box, and another Zilkwa soldier began tapping away at its symbols. Though it was not possible, Creek wanted to call out to V159 or V160 to direct their fire on the two with the box. He watched helplessly. Seconds later, he observed as V159 put a large hole where a Zilkwa soldier's face used to be, and almost as if V159 had heard Creek's thoughts, he took aim at the Zilkwa holding the strange box. Creek knew it was too late as he heard the soldier call out, "Zilkwa is great!" Just before V159 could fire his weapon, the soldier froze in place and crumbled as if he were a statue made of dust. The box screeched skyward, stopping near the far end of the city, within little more than a blink of an eye. Creek pulled up new holographic images all around him in an attempt to get a closer look at what it may have been. Creek found one showing the box just as it divided into two equal pieces. From each of the two sections emerged what appeared to be micro-stars that instantly began spinning in opposite directions, creating a ring in the sky miles above the city. Creek could not believe his eyes as he began to receive data from the area. It's the Sorona drive from galactic cruisers. Beginning calculations for what it would do, panic took him over as the uncontained drive spun faster above his city. Even at its drastically reduced size, it would obliterate half the city. Before his computations had barely started, he witnessed its capabilities firsthand. Screens all around him flashed black, just as he slammed against a concrete wall, along with every other loose object in his lab. Time seemed to slow down as his flesh attempted to meld with the concrete, where he was held by extreme gravity. Just as his body had neared its limits, he was released from the wall and crumpled to the floor. He struggled to his feet and focused his attention on the surrounding holograms of the city. Every Norcox and structure within the ring of the uncontained Sorona drive was now falling to ozone from the upper levels of the atmosphere. Everything around him was vibrating as fragments of the city crashed to the ground. Creek turned to a holographic view high above the city showing structures being pulled in the direction of the extreme gravity pulse. Knowing Norcock's lives lost to battle would be restored, Creek's true sorrow was for the loss of physical history. Much of what had been destroyed had survived from far before the binding and could never be regained. Creek's thoughts shifted to V159. Did you survive? He quickly worked to assess their transmitters, and after reconnecting, he received images he couldn't explain. V159 and V160 stood extremely close, face to face, and blinking for long periods of time. Out of concern that their bodies may have experienced fatal issues, or worse, a hunger for flesh returned, causing them to devour each other. Creek sent out 2 retrieval drones. They arrived within minutes, and he was pleased to not see any signs one had been feasting on the other. But still, he had no explanation for the strange scene he witnessed through their transmitters. Unable to find any explanations, Creek decided to place them in stasis to prevent one from doing harm to the other. While others seemed to be on a fast track to end the war, Creek remained locked in his lab studying his creations. All 4 Norcock's worlds had been devastated by the war. No one could or would believe they had caused it. Days and weeks passed without any new attacks launched. Rather, all called for the removal of current planetary leadership and formation of a new government. This new government contained not one from each planet, but one from every megacity, with one high chair enacting their will. The greatest difference between the new and old government was not that of a larger group of members, but the risk to the high chair's concessions if something should go wrong. If the high chair failed to uphold rulings of the lower chair, that high chair's consciousness would be unbound from source crystals and terminated. It didn't take long before Creek received notification of the high chair's first order, one that Creek very much wanted to disobey. However, as the Norcock's people could not personally do violence to others, they also could not physically disobey societal decisions. The order stated all Hoganlow soldiers were to be prepared for transport to a research solar system as soon as the current reptilian experiment is terminated and planetary conditions made suitable.